Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a massive stack of sources on the table today, pulling from the core texts, author annotations, and thematic analysis to break down the final act of Fourth Wing.
And our mission today isn't just to recap what happens. We're going to really dissect the structural pacing of this finale, the ethics of the staggering secrets kept by the riders and dragons, and how that world-shattering final reveal completely dismantles everything we thought we knew about Navarre.
Yeah, because we are looking at a masterclass in narrative destabilization here. We're tracking the transition from the vulnerability of Reunification Day straight into the ambush at Athabine, the tactical nightmare at Rasan, and finally into a rebuilt Eratia where, the history books are essentially rewritten in real time.
Let's start with that transition, actually, because the structural fake-out here is so deliberate.
Oh, totally deliberate.
We kick off this final sequence with Reunification Day, and Violet decides to cross the parapet again in the dark, in a dress, just to reach Azadin. It's an obvious mirror to her first trial, but the stakes are entirely internal this time. She's leaving the defensive perimeter she's built around her own heart.
Using that specific physical architecture to map her emotional state is, well, it's highly effective. She's crossing the void.
Right, but what's really interesting is how this sequence functions within the broader pacing of the story. The reader is given the payoff they've been waiting for. The walls come down, they share this moment of intense honesty, they sleep together. The tension of the romance arc is seemingly resolved.
And then literally moments later, Garrick is pounding on the door because the war games have started. Which, makes me question the mechanics of that pacing. Is it just authorial manipulation?
You mean forcing the military crisis at the exact second the romantic tension drops?
Yeah, it feels almost entirely designed to punish Violet for finally letting her guard down.
Well, it's absolutely designed to disorient, but I wouldn't call it cheap manipulation. It's a recognized structural technique. By giving the audience that false summit of safety, the subsequent drop into chaos is exponentially more jarring.
Like if you're braced for impact, a hit doesn't hurt as much.
Exactly. Violet, and by extension, the reader, is completely unbraced here. The vulnerability of that intimacy is what makes the sudden shift to a combat footing feel so deeply unsafe.
Which brings us to the deployment. Dane argues aggressively against Fourth Wing being sent to Athabine, an outpost sitting outside the magical wards.
But Violet ignores his warnings.
She does. She chooses to follow Xaden. She relies on the trust she just solidified with him. So armed with that profound, newly minted trust, they fly out to this isolated outpost.
And that is where the ideological foundation of the entire book collapses.
Boom! Just like that. They land near the outpost and are immediately met by Poromil Griffin flyers. But instead of a battle, Xaden looks at these supposed enemy combatants and tells them, "You're early."
That line gives me chills every time.
Right. He's been smuggling weapons to them. The propaganda dissolves right there. We find out the Venin and the Wyvern aren't just fables used to scare cadets. They're an active, apocalyptic threat, and the leadership of Navarre knows it.
They are deliberately hoarding the protective magic of the wards and letting the people of Poromil be slaughtered.
It's sickening. But we have to differentiate between the types of betrayal happening in this sequence because they operate on completely different ethical frequencies.
Let's unpack that. The betrayal by Navarre's leadership, Colonel Ados, and Dane by extension, is institutional. It's the cold calculus of maintaining a quarantine zone.
Right. They're willing to sacrifice civilians outside the wards.
And they're willing to execute their own cadets just to protect their political and geographical borders.
Dane essentially weaponized his signet to orchestrate a hit. He read Violet's memories under the guise of physical affection to find out Xaden's location and handed it to his father.
Which is just a massive violation.
A huge violation. But as horrific as that institutional betrayal is, the personal betrayal from Xaden and the Dragons feels, almost more insidious.
Well, let's look at Xaden's justification first. He operates under the ethics of an insurgency. If he tells Violet the truth about the Venin and the weapon smuggling, Dane will inevitably see it in her memories.
Because Dane touches her face all the time.
Right. Dane is a rigid institutionalist. He would report them, and hundreds of marked ones and Griffin flyers would be executed. Xaden is prioritizing collective survival over interpersonal honesty.
I understand the tactical logic, I really do. But it completely invalidates his earlier demands for Violet's absolute trust. You cannot demand total transparency from a partner while treating them as an operational security risk.
It's a paradox for sure.
But honestly, Zevaiden's secrecy isn't even the part that bothers me the most, it's Tarn.
Ah, yeah. The dragon dynamic complicates this immensely. Tarn shares a mating bond with Scale, Zayden's dragon. Through that link, Tarn knew the Venin were real. He knew Zayden was running weapons.
And he said nothing. He lives in Violet's mind. They share a psychic connection. I push back heavily on the idea that Tarn was just, waiting for Zayden to tell his own story.
So you don't buy the dragon autonomy argument?
Not at all. Is dragon autonomy an excuse for complicity? By staying silent, Tarn is endorsing a system that systematically feeds human cadets into a meat grinder based on a lie. Doesn't the Rider-Dragon bond require mutual transparency?
See, you're viewing the bond through a human moral framework, which the text actively discourages.
How so?
Dragons are not human accessories. They are apex predators and political entities with lifespans that make human conflicts look incredibly brief. Tarn's primary allegiance is to the Veil, the dragon hatching grounds.
Right, the wards protect the Veil.
Exactly. The dragons allow humans to channel their magic to sustain the wards protecting that specific geography. From Tarn's perspective, Zayden's rebellion is just human politics.
But Violet is his human. If you link your consciousness to someone, you owe them the reality of the world they are fighting in. It leaves Violet completely isolated. She can't trust the military she serves, the man she loves, or the ancient entity living inside her own head.
Which forces her into the ultimate crucible at Rason. Standing in that deserted outpost, reading the note from Colonel Ados that essentially says, "Survive if you can," the squad has a choice.
A horrible choice.
They can turn around, fly back inside the wards, and live in the lie. Or they can stay and defend the trading post against the threat they were never trained to fight.
And the fact that they stay is what fundamentally shifts the genre of this story. We move from a hyper-competitive military academy narrative into a full-blown apocalyptic survival scenario.
The combat against the Venin and the Wyvern Hive is chaotic, and it costs them dearly.
Oh my gosh, the loss of Liam.
It is the narrative toll required to prove these new stakes are real. Up until this point, the dangers have been contained. Jack Barlow, the Gauntlet, a slick parapet. But Liam's death shatters the illusion of plot armor.
It's devastating, and his dying breath asking Violet to protect his sister, gut-wrenching. But amidst that chaos, Violet manages to analyze the battlefield mechanics. She realizes that when a Venin is killed, the wyvern it created also dropped dead.
It's essentially a centralized network.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it like unplugging the main Wi-Fi router to instantly disconnect all the wyvern devices. You don't fight the individual nodes, you take out the server to crash the entire system.
That analogy works really well to describe the tactical approach, but let's look at the underlying magical ecology it reveals. The text sets up a stark contrast between two types of magic here.
Okay, break that down.
The riders and dragons utilize a symbiotic magic. Dragons channel naturally from the earth and gift it to humans. The Venin utilize a parasitic magic. They bypass the dragons and rip power directly from the earth, corrupting their own humanity in the process to animate the wyvern.
So it's a battle of natural order versus ecological theft.
Exactly. And fighting that unnatural power demands an extreme physical toll. Violet is forced to channel Andarna's time-stopping ability just long enough to land a direct lightning strike on the Venin leader.
But in doing so, she gets stabbed by a poisoned blade. Her blood literally turns black, and she falls unconscious off Tarn, caught just in time by Andarna.
Which reinforces the strict rules of this magic system.
Yeah.
It isn't a limitless resource. We learned earlier that Naelin, Tarn's previous rider, essentially burned his own life force out.
Right.
Here, Andarna drains herself completely to catch Violet, and Violet's body is fundamentally failing under the venin poison. The cost of wielding power in this universe is profoundly physical.
It's not just waving a wand. Adin realizes she won't survive the 12-hour flight back to the Basgioth healers, so he makes the call to bypass the military hierarchy entirely and take her somewhere hidden.
This triggers the shift into the final chapter, where we finally step into Xaden's point of view. 3 days have passed.
3 whole days. And Violet wakes up in Aracia, the capital of the Tyrrendor province, the same city the Navarian history books claim was burned to ash and salted after the rebellion.
But it's not. It's completely intact and thriving. The tactical logistics of keeping a massive city hidden from the Navarian military is fascinating.
Wait, how did they even do that? General Melgren can see the future of any battle.
It's a brilliant exploitation of a magical loophole. Melgren, the commander of Navarre's forces, does wield the signet to see the outcome of battles. But the text establishes earlier that his power has a blind spot.
Ah, the marked ones.
Yes. When 3 or more marked ones, the children carrying the rebellion's dragon relic, are gathered together, his vision goes dark.
So by concentrating all the surviving Mark children in Erasia, they essentially draped a massive radar-jamming blanket over the entire province. Melgan can't see what they are building because the very relics he forced upon them are blinding him.
It's incredible strategic irony. But the Sanctuary of Erasia comes with massive psychological shocks for Violet.
Oh, for sure. First, she realizes Andarna has woken up from the battle exhaustion, physically transformed. She's grown into an adolescent dragon.
But the biological cost of that growth spurt is the loss of her Feathertail gift. She can no longer freeze time.
Which is huge. Structurally, that safety net had to be removed. Violet can no longer rely on a temporal cheat code to escape impossible odds. She's going to have to master her own chaotic lightning signet moving forward.
She has to rely on her own strength. And then comes the confrontation with Xaden.
Oh boy.
He confesses he loves her and promises to spend his life earning back the trust he broke.
But before we can even unpack the viability of that promise, there's a knock at the door. And the person standing there is Brennan, Violet's older brother. The golden boy of the Writer's Quadrant who supposedly died 5 years ago. He just walks in and welcomes her to the revolution.
It completely shatters the foundation of her reality.
Shatters almost feels like an understatement. I mean, think about the psychological devastation here. Xaden hid the reality of the war, yes, but he also looked Violet in the eye, day after day, knowing she was deeply grieving a brother who was actually alive and actively running the revolution Xaden was part of.
It's a staggering level of deception.
How do you build a relationship with someone whose entire foundation with you is a massive lie? Like he let her cry over her dead brother when he knew where he was.
It forces us to examine the core theme running through the entire narrative, which is that history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
Everything Violet believed was constructed by her parents. Her mother, the commanding general, enforced the ruthless efficiency of the military and the necessity of the wards. Her father, the scribe, transcribed the approved history and the fables of the outside world.
And in the span of like a few chapters, she discovers her mother's military is complicit in mass murder. The fables her father recorded are biological realities, and her dead brother is a revolutionary leader. Every single pillar of her identity has been hollowed out.
Which leaves her in a profoundly dangerous yet powerful position. She is no longer the fragile scribe candidate trying to survive the gauntlet. She has to actively choose what her new reality will be, independent of the institutions that raised her.
What a monumental shift. Just looking back at the ground we've covered in this deep dive, we started with a desperate walk across a parapet in the dark, moved through the ethical nightmare of Xaden and Terran's silence, broke down the parasitic magic of the Venin at Rasan, and ended in a hidden city with a ghost walking through the door.
It demands a complete reread of the source material. I mean, every battle brief, every offhand comment from leadership, every one of Xaden's unexplained absences now carries an entirely different weight.
Speaking of things carrying a different weight, I want to leave you with a detail from the text to really mull over. Earlier in the story, Violet finds a hidden note from her dad tucked inside her book of fables.
Oh, yeah, note.
The note simply said, "It only takes one desperate generation to change history, even erase it. I know you'll make the right choice when the time comes."
When you realize the fables are actually survival guides, that note becomes a massive red flag regarding the scribe quadrant.
Exactly. Did her father know the truth about the Venin? As a high-ranking scribe, did he uncover the evidence that leadership was deliberately erasing history? Did he know Brennan was actually alive in Tyrrendor?
The implication suggests the rot in Navarre goes much deeper than just the military generals.
And if he knew all of those explosive secrets, was his sudden death a year ago really just a failing heart? Or was the scribe silenced by Navarre for knowing too much? Let that simmer.
There is so much more to uncover there.
And we are definitely going to keep digging into it. That wraps up our deep dive into the main narrative of Fourth Wing, but, the journey isn't over. We are not done with these sources.
Not even close.
Next time, we're flipping the perspective entirely. We'll be analyzing the bonus chapters from Aizen's point of view, chapters 9, 16, and 27, to see exactly what tactical and emotional calculations he was making while hiding these world-ending secrets from the cadets around him.
Unpacking his internal monologue during those early interactions is going to completely reframe the first half of the story.
I cannot wait to tear into it, because if there's one major takeaway from this analysis, it's that you can train your whole life to keep your footing, but the true test of character is what you do when the ground disappears entirely. We'll catch you next time.